Alrighty, well, let's get started with our next session. We have Kendra Havens joining us, talking about testing tools for .NET and cross-platform apps. Hello, Kendra.
Hi, it's so good to be here.
Yes.
I'll launch in, I guess. So,
Take it away.
Hi, I'm Kendra. My Twitter handle is GotHeap if you want to send me questions. They'll give me all of the questions, I guess, at the end. Let's dive in, all about testing tools for .NET and cross-platform apps. So I have a lot to show. We've got some performance goodies that I really want to dig into. We've heard a lot about performance already with Hot Reload, with 64-bit Visual Studio 2022, and .NET 6, of course. I'd love to dive in even further, kind of talk a little bit about the test engine itself. The code coverage platform is kind of speeding up your everyday development. And then I'll dive into how Hot Reload specifically applies to testing tools. There's actually a few different behaviors in there that I want to go over, some experimental features and stuff. So we'll look at the interaction here and some things to be aware of. And then I just have a few nice things, some hopefully quality of life improvements that will make your everyday development, your everyday F5 just a little bit better when you're testing. And then we'll talk more about remote testing with Linux containers, WSL, and even over SSH. That's the idea of connecting your local Visual Studio Test Explorer to a remote machine and have it run tests, or a remote container and have it run your tests for you on different operatings and stuff. Super cool. And then I'll get into Playwright. So again, with the cross-platform sort of testing scenarios and stuff, Playwright's our new sort of web UI framework that Microsoft is coming out with. That's completely open source. It'll be cool to look at. Okay, so let's dive in a little bit into the performance. I have a video for us side by side. It's really, really fast. So on the left side, we have Visual Studio 2019, and on the right side, we have Visual Studio 2022, and I'm going to do a code coverage run. So it's going to kick off my test run, and I'm going to speed it up a little bit because it's running about 1,000 tests. Now, the cool thing with this is on the exact same code base. This is on a few of the projects in the Roslyn solution, exact same code. They're both targeting .NET 5, actually. So the performance improvements that we're seeing here specifically are going to be in the code coverage, the .NET test engine itself. So on the right side, Visual Studio 2022 finished in 70 seconds, and on the left side, Visual Studio 2019 took about 113 seconds. So that's just a really quick demo, kind of comparing them side by side on how we're shaving off these numbers. So how are we doing that? First, it's a more efficient merging of code coverage reports. So my second table here, if you take just about 10 files and really, really zoom in, that used to take about 20 seconds just to merge all of those files that were generated off of your DLLs and what code coverage reports they were taking, and then, merging them to get the final percentages of what your project's coverage is. So now it's down to 4 seconds in 2022. And then when we scale that up, if you look at it over 78,000 tests, a subset of the Roslyn project code base, that whole run, that code coverage, it used to take 93 minutes. Now it's down to 69 minutes in our labs. So even our own development team is getting some time back there. And that's just within kind of the code coverage engine, which is cool. So that's let alone, being on 64-bit and, using a newer target framework like .NET 6 is obviously going to get a ton of perf benefits there. So a lot of performance, a lot of different ways. Part of this was also because when we moved the code coverage tools cross-platform, we moved them from a native implementation to a managed. They can now run on Linux. They're available in a .NET global tool. So that's .NET-coverage is the global tool that's available cross-platform for code coverage. That whole migration also gave us a bunch of performance back. So kind of a few things going on there that are just cool to call out. I want to celebrate them. Another one that should be pretty impactful for your everyday sort of testing in your F5 loop, we're altering a bit of the test host startup process so we can start it a bit earlier, and we might actually be able to reuse the test host in between test runs to kind of keep your Test Explorer hot, keep it ready to run your tests, and that's actually going to shave off 3 seconds or so on some of your test host startups. So kind of look for more responsive tools, just a little bit in there where we're shaving off the seconds of your everyday stuff. So let's dive into a demo. Let's look a little bit more. So you've seen a ton of hot reload today. I want to show you more. Let's be real. It's a true joy to demo. I'll introduce you to this app. I think Mika's going to be using this app as well in the very next talk on productivity tools. This is a super simple solar system app. It talks about the days till the full moon, what planets are going to be visible in tonight's sky. I have a little NASA RSS feed. I can find the planets that will be visible tomorrow in the night sky. You know, just some fun stuff. So some things we've seen with Hot Reload are the ability to kind of update our app. So I think we've seen the editing of a lot of elements as it's running. Let's go ahead and edit some actual like Razor code, some C# code. So here's where I have the code that I'm searching through what planets are visible on what dates, and I'm comparing them to today. So I have a little if statement that compares if it's within this planet's visible date range, and then it will add that planet to the string that I'm displaying in my app. Right here. So if I went ahead and broke this code, I'll go ahead and make it so that it never actually enters that if statement, and I hot reload my changes, and I look back at my app, you can see it just disappeared, so I don't have any more visible planets. So let's take a look at that same piece of code, but in a test. So here I'm again testing the visible planets and what planets are visible in between the dates that I have a JSON file that I'm parsing of what the date ranges actually are for everything. And I'll go ahead and run this test. And I haven't broken this yet, so it's still going to be able to get to this console.write line within my test. So I'll go ahead and run it, and we'll take a look at the results. So right now it's able to get into that if statement. It prints some things out to my standard output. So one thing that's interesting, and I'll go ahead and pin my output window up here so we can kind of see exactly what's happening. I'm going to go ahead and clear it for my test. And actually, we do want to be on a build because I want to show you that it's not going to rebuild my test in between test runs. So Hot Reload for the Test Explorer is an experimental feature, so you do have to turn it on. You can go to the Tools options for testing, and it is this checkbox. It is experimental. And one thing that's different than general Hot Reload, this is Hot Reload for the Test Explorer is only .NET 6 and higher. We don't patch the active debug runtime the same way that you can do when you're like F5ing through an app or control F5ing through an app. So it is .NET 6 and higher for testing specifically. So that's a note to know you got to turn it on. So let's go ahead and change my code a little bit, kind of do the same edit that I did in the running app to make it so that this if statement is never entered into, and I'm going to go ahead and rerun this. And you can see in my output, I have my build window open right now. No rebuild. It was able to run tests with changes without having to rebuild my test projects or anything like that. So if I go into my test output as well, you can see that it's computing my Hot Reload updates. It completed. It's using Hot Reload to skip build, so I kind of also know what build I'm using is going to be able to skip a full build. It's able to just hot reload those tests and run it. So one interesting thing, so there, much like Hot Reload, there still exists the idea of sort of root edits where we can't reload in between, and we're just going to fall back to doing a full build in those scenarios. So if I do something like change my test name, have this test fully rediscovered, I'm going to go ahead and run it. And you can see that a build is starting. So exactly what you would kind of do today. So it defaults back to doing a full build if it senses changes that can't be hot reloaded within the Test Explorer. But if you have changes that can, it's going to save you a ton of build time. So I'm really, really excited about that. That's hot reloaded in the Test Explorer. Got to turn it on. It's under experimental feature flag and tools options, and it's for .NET 6 and higher. Okay, so let's move on to just a couple things in the Test Explorer that can kind of improve your everyday development. I think it'll be super, super widely applicable. So one of them, which I absolutely love, is show in Test Explorer. So let's say my Test Explorer is all collapsed. I'm gonna go exit out of it. Show in Test Explorer is the ability to right click and show in Test Explorer. So it pops open my Test Explorer of where that test is. It highlights the code. It expands the parent node of where that test exists. And it keeps my editor that I'm editing a test in sync with my Test Explorer, which is super cool. So this is a lot like the idea of sync with active document in the Solution Explorer. This little button here that a lot of people love every time they discover it. It can jump and scroll your Test Explorer and expand to have the file that you're working in your editor in sync. So we have absolutely the same thing working for tests, finally. So I can right click, show in Test Explorer. I can also use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control-ES. I am so looking forward to how many people get to kind of reduce, copying and pasting or searching for the Test Explorer name and filtering the file and all of that they've had to do in the past. Now you don't even need to know. You could have the name scrolled off the screen and everything and just hop in between, Control-ES, and it pops open the Test Explorer. Finally, just these little things, Okay, so another one is, you've probably seen me talking about all of these console.write lines appearing in the Test Explorer. So we changed a bit of this test detail summary pane to have more information. So it now prints all of standard out and standard error into the test detail summary pane. So every time I'm using console.writeLine, it will show up. If I'm using console.error as well, it will show up and it appears in these nice collapsible sections. I have my stack trace there. So it's easy to navigate to. And let's look at this test. We also changed a little bit of the ability to truncate tests. So for tests that have huge test logs, or huge, any kind of console log, we now show way more characters. We upped the limit for that so you can have a lot more context, but if you still need that additional output, you can always open the long test log. And another thing we improved in the window as well is, as always, you can kind of select substrings, which is really nice if you want to specifically copy out the exception information or something like that. And okay, this is just wrap, unwrap. Hello, we got it in. I'm very excited about having that. So just sort of nice everyday details that I think you'll really like. Expand all is another one. We didn't have it for a while. We were worried about there are test spaces that use the Test Explorer that have hundreds of thousands of tests. So expand all, needing to run discovery, and when you have your test hierarchy in a lot of different modes, that can be kind of an expensive operation to redo a bunch of sorting sort of on the fly. So we needed to work through some of the performance, but we now have that kind of expand all in the Test Explorer. Okay, and actually let's go back to class. And there's your customizable hierarchy as well, which we absolutely love. All right, so let's move on to a bit of remote testing. So as I said in the beginning, this is the idea of connecting your Visual Studio Test Explorer to remote environments. So a lot of you might have noticed I have this shiny new drop down in the Test Explorer, and right now it is set to my Windows local environment. So if I went and run tests here, and we took a look at what tests I have a couple that's running on Linux, one is running on Windows. It's going to skip the Linux one if it senses that I'm trying to run tests on Windows, I guess run a Linux test on Windows, it'll skip it, and it'll do vice versa. If I'm running the test run on Linux and I get to this Windows test, it'll skip it. So this feature right now, this dropdown is defined by a test environment.json file. And that looks like this. We have a lot of documentation at aka.ms/remote testing to kind of take you through how you define this file. But essentially, it'll save things like what Docker image you want your Test Explorer to connect to that's running on your local machine. You can connect to a local Ubuntu install on WSL. And you can also SSH into connections. So let's take a look at that. This feature, big thing about this feature is it is bring your own compute. So I need to actually spin up a Docker container to connect to. So it kind of assumes that all of this, this compute is available on your machine. We don't spin it up for you. So now that I've spun up this Docker container, I'm going to go ahead and connect to it. So my tests are going to be rediscovered there. And I'll go ahead and try to rerun those OS tests. So a lot of my test status was kind of reset. And I'll go ahead and run it. So now my Linux test is passing and my Windows test is skipped. Okay, well that's fairly cool, but let's step it up a little bit further. Let's try to debug a Linux test from my Windows Visual Studio inside of this Docker Linux container. So this is also available. So I've set a breakpoint in my Linux test. And this is really cool. I was hoping I'd get this pop up. So since I was freshly building my machine, or my container, I hadn't actually downloaded the remote Windows debugger inside of my container. That is a dependency you'll have to do. We have some logic to actually help you acquisition that on the fly if you start a debug session with this remote Linux container, which is pretty exciting. So yeah, I hit my breakpoint. I am inside of Linux. I can hover and see my OS platform is Linux and all of that. Super cool. All right, so I also mentioned SSH connections. So I have a VM running in Azure that I've already set up and provisioned for, myself. I have our remote connection strings. I have my SSH credentials and all of that stored. So when I go ahead and connect to my SSH connection, I'll go ahead and check my test output just to make sure everything is going as planned. So it was, So it's been able to connect to it. It detected a remote Windows environment. A little worried about some of the diagnostic logs it's giving me. Let's see if it was able to discover those tests. Oh, it looks like it was. So right now it actually has 2 tests. I think it's because it's still caching the test results of the old environment. But once I run those, it will actually figure out, there's only 3 discovered tests on this new SSH connection. So this is connecting to a VM that I have in Azure, and this VM is actually running Windows 10. So I'm able to run tests on a Windows 10, and that's not the current computer that I'm using. I'm on Windows 11. So I can also run tests on completely different operating systems than I have set up on my local machine. A lot of people are actually really interested in this. We've definitely been just talking with the Windows team, because turns out they make operating systems. They have a lot of VMs that they want to run tests and connect to. So that's kind of some of the benefit that they're seeing there. Okay, so that's remote testing in the Visual Studio Test Explorer. We have documentation. I'll share it at the end on how to kind of get set up and everything. I would say it's still sort of in a preview mode of a feature. We don't have like templates built in to getting started and everything. There's a lot of when I say bring your own compute, it's also, you got to figure out a lot of configuration for yourself. You need to enable SSH on the remote environment, allow your Visual Studio account to connect to it and that kind of thing. So there's some setup involved for sure. But it's just cool that it's possible. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about is Playwright. So I mentioned that Playwright is our latest web UI framework that's actually being developed by Microsoft in the open source. There's a lot of cool things about this. First off, it's kind of language agnostic. So it actually works not only for .NET, but TypeScript, Python, and Java. So it's kind of written with multi-language kind of perspective at the get-go, and it specifically focuses on asynchronous code calls, which is super important with web tests specifically because sometimes elements don't render in time. You're calling a service or your web page is lagging. There's a lot of reasons that web tests might have some delays or end up being flaky actually and failing for reasons that, you know, it just needed a good await call. It just needed some good fundamental asynchronous calls built into the test framework, which is what we got with Playwright. So asynchronous is absolutely a huge part. And it's also cross-platform, I should mention that. So let me show you a key feature of it, and it's cross-platform-ness. So I'm going to start up the Playwright test recorder right now, and I can do this with the Playwright CodeGen CLI tool. I'm starting this from my Visual Studio Developer PowerShell, but you can run it from any terminal. You could run it from VS Code. If you're on Linux, you could run it from the terminal there and record this test. So it went up and started up a blank sort of Edge browser for me, and it has this Playwright inspector for me. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate around places. I'll go to the Playwright docs. And you can see as soon as I navigate, I have a step added in here on the right side of my test. So now I'll go ahead and click on Docs. I can, let's see, I want to travel around a little bit. Let's go to supported languages. Let's check out .NET because it is the .NET conference. And it recorded all of the steps that I had right in the right side here. So I can copy this out, and I'm actually going to copy it into an MS test that I have in my solution right now, but notice that everything it generated here, it actually generated inside of a main program. So you could also run this as sort of an app that can just run, trigger your website, take it through its paces, and then spin down. So it's very, very easy to fire off. You can see I have multiple targets here. I could have set it to a different language in this dropdown to kind of convert my scripts. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Well, let's put that there. Another thing to call out, it adds in a lot of asserts and suggested places. It doesn't quite, we have some work to do here. It doesn't quite get the correct framework that you're using or anything like that. I'm on MS Test. You can also write in unit or X unit tests using Playwright. But I'll go ahead and run this and see it's running. Headless is set to false, so it's actually going to appear right now on my desktop. It'll spin up a whole browser for me and really rapidly run through all of the steps that I just did when I was recording it. Trying to tell if I clicked out of it. It might have, let me try that again. I believe. Do I have any build errors? No, looks good. All right, let me try the next test that I wanted to run. And it kind of does the same thing, navigates around our docs. Oh, I know what I did wrong. I'm still trying to run it on my SSH connection, so probably, so sorry, I was firing up that test in the wrong remote environment. That's on me. I'm too excited to talk about all of these cross-platform places. Got to find out where I am. Okay, let's do that again. So it's probably rediscovering tests. There we go. There's my browser. It jumps through all of those steps that I took when I was recording it. Another really key feature of Playwright is the ability to, gosh, there's just a ton of stuff you can do. One of the things that people really like is you can take screenshots throughout steps of your test. So I'll go ahead and run that, and we can check out the screenshot really quick that it took. And I had headless set to false again, so I think it'll pop up really quickly, scurry through all of those steps for me, put my app through its paces, and then I can go to my debug folder and actually check out the screenshot that it took of my tests. Boom, so it has kind of the instance of where that, what was happening, what it looked like in each step. So super, super valuable to be able to kind of run through a cross-platform web browser, put your app through its paces, be able to run it on with any modern browser on multiple different operating systems or environments to see how your app behaves and where it naturally is in this cross-platform world. Okay. So here's a bunch of the stuff that I talked about. You can check out our testing tools docs, just aka.ms/test explorer. That'll get you to the right place and on docs.microsoft.com. Again, all of our docs and everything are open source. One thing I want to mention too, the underlying, testing engine that powers all of .NET Test, that's open source as well. You can find it on GitHub at, it's the VS Test repo. It powers all of .NET Test. You can check out what we're doing there. The Microsoft Test Framework for .NET MS Test is also open source as well. So love seeing the interactions with the community on GitHub and everything. I don't think we talk about it quite as much as some of our other repos, but you can definitely check it out and engage with the devs that I talk to every day. You can check out our code coverage global tool and our remote testing docs, and there's the link for Playwright as well. That about wraps it up for me.
Fantastic.
Amazing.
What do you think?
It
Cool.
was epic. Oh my gosh, wow, you could really run it everywhere. You have all of these options for cross-platform.
Yeah, the SSH stuff is really cool.
Yeah. It looks like folks on Twitter are excited too. Finally, we can have a console write line in the Test Explorer.
Yes, all-time favorite feature.
It's the
Dustin
little
Campbell
things.
told
It's
me
the little
yesterday, this is it. This is what he needed for years.
It's one thing.
Finally.
You ship a 64-bit Visual Studio like now, but console.writeline.
Console.writeline, just appearing where you want it to.
There is an ask
Who'da thought?
here for a potentially new feature. Can we have different styling and coloring for warning and error messages in the test detail summary pane?
Ooh, I like that. There's no way to set it now. Some things there are some extensibility parts of like fonts and colors for test items, so you might be able to do something like set the font or color there, but as far as how they're attached to warnings and error messages, I like this suggestion. We'll have to put it on the backlog, see if it
Only
gets
you
some
were the
momentum.
PM for the feature and could have the power to do that.
Yeah, I'll talk to the PM who is supposed to figure
who
all
is
that out.
The set of all people who are you. So you could probably have that checked in by the end of the day.
There has to be a fierce internal debate first.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So
Thank you so much, Kendra. That was amazing.
yeah, thank you.